So this video for us is going to wrap up carbohydrates. We had left off talking about how dietary sugars and dietary carbohydrates are truly actually the same type of molecule, but just different levels of complexity. What we're going to move on to now is talking about function. So the major function of carbohydrates is energy, whether it's quick energy or whether it's more long-term energy storage. Your smaller molecules, so your monosaccharides, disaccharides, are going to be your quicker form of energy, and your larger polysaccharides are going to be your more long-term energy storage. There are some plants, animals, and fungi that also use carbohydrates for structural support. So for example, tree bark is made of carbohydrates. So we're going to look at some specific examples. Before we look at some examples, though, we want to have our terminology. So just like all of our large macromolecules have monomers and specific names for them, so our monomer for carbohydrates are our monosaccharides, all of our macromolecules also have polymer names. So for our carbohydrates, the specific name for the large carbohydrate structures, they are called polysaccharides. So just like monosaccharide means one sugar, polysaccharide means many sugars. So the diagram down here in the corner is just showing you the basic principle of monomer and polymer. So here's your monomer. Remember, it doesn't mean that it just has to be one atom. It's not that simplistic. They're still molecules. They still have some levels of complexity, but it's just that they repeat over and over and over and over again in order to form your polymers. The three examples of polysaccharides that I'm going to want you guys to know is the first one is cellulose. Cellulose is a tough and flexible polysaccharide. It's the major component in wood and paper. As you write your notes down, you are writing them on cellulose. That's what your paper is made out of. And it's used for structure in plants. If you look over to the right-hand side, you'll notice that we have a picture of a panda right there. So he's an example of an herbivore that's able to digest this cellulose. You are not able to do this. Which means, and we know this because a lot of people, when they're on diets, they tend to eat foods high in cellulose. So we know that lettuce, you can eat a lot of lettuce and there's not a lot of calories in it. Calories are essentially a measure of how much energy we can extract from our food. So the fact that lettuce and celery and things like this are low-calorie foods is because they're primarily composed of cellulose. We're unable to extract any dietary calories from them. Beneath the picture of our panda, our nice herbivore, you have an example of, this is the general structure of a plant cell wall. On the outside, you have a pectin layer, and that's shown in blue. And on the underside, that's your cell membrane or your plasma membrane. All of those sort of greenish tubules that run in between, that's your cell wall. Specifically, those cell wall tubules are made out of cellulose. So they are what makes up the cell wall of plants. The next one I want you guys to know is chitin. Chitin is a tough and protective polysaccharide. We find it in the exoskeleton of some insects and arthropods. So for example, gross but descriptive, if you've ever, stepped on a beetle or something and you know that kind of crunchy sound, that's chitin. So that's the shell, that protective exoskeleton that we find on those insects. We also find chitin in our fungi. So whereas plants, they have cellulose in their cell walls to make that rigid structure, your fungi actually have chitin in their cell wall. So I've given you a few pictures of some fungi over there, or mushrooms. And then if you look directly underneath your text, you have a picture of the general structure of a cell membrane and a cell wall for a fungi. Everything that's in yellow in between your protein outer shell and your cell membrane on the inside, that's that chitin cell wall right there. The next one we want to know is starch. So starch is long-term energy storage in plants. It can be digested by humans, and when we talk about carbo loading, so if you have like a big race or some big sporting event and you have a pasta party the night before, and you say that you're carbo loading for energy, what you're doing is you're eating a lot of starch. And where this starch comes from is it's stored extra glucose molecules. So a potato, for example, is very high in starch. So the potato plant itself, when it makes extra glucose during photosynthesis, is the potato portion that we eat is actually kind of its storehouse for winter. So it'll take those glucose molecules, combine them all together to make these massive starch polysaccharides. When we dig these potatoes up and eat them, what we're essentially doing is taking those polysaccharides, those energy storage from the plants, to make energy for ourselves. The last one I want you guys to know is glycogen. Glycogen is incredibly important in the human body, and we're going to look at our first sort of disorder that's associated with dysregulation of a certain portion of our anatomy. So, what I want you guys to do right now is there is a box inside your notes that asks you guys to go and research what glycogen is and how it works inside the human body. I'd like you guys to try this on your own first. Write your notes in there. Please do it in pencil. And then next time we meet, we are going to go through and talk about what glycogen is and how it functions inside the body. So go ahead, do that now.